My husband is a manager at a prestigious company. You, with just a high school diploma, could never achieve that in your lifetime." While attending a reception at a high-end restaurant, I ran into a former classmate who made snide remarks about how out of place I seemed and suddenly began bragging about her husband. Unaware of my circumstances, she continued to belittle me, calling me a failure and a bottom feeder. "So, he's getting fired tomorrow." What? Having reached my limit with her comments, I finally responded to her. My classmate was just confused and had nothing to say. Ignoring her, I left the scene. As a result, she went from heaven to hell, facing a miserable fate. My name is Michael, and I'm 46 years old. I run a fashion company. At 35, I took over the company from the previous president, Mr. Thompson, and became the president myself. Thanks to a referral, I got a job at this company right after graduating from high school, and my hard work was recognized by Mr. Thompson. To this day, I work closely with my employees to contribute to the company's success. In my personal life, at 25, Mr. Thompson suggested a formal date for me, and I married Sarah, a woman 3 years my junior who also worked at the same company. Soon after our marriage, we were blessed with a daughter, who is now a college student. When Sarah became pregnant, she left her job to focus on homemaking and child rearing, but when I became president, she returned to work as my secretary. With Sarah's support, I continue to strive in my role as president. Despite the busy yet fulfilling days, a certain incident led me to face a significant challenge. I grew up in a single-parent household, raised by my mother. I managed to attend high school, but college was out of reach, leading me to choose employment instead. In my sophomore year of high school, my mother had to be hospitalized, prompting me to take on a paper route in the early mornings and juggle evening shifts at a diner and a tavern to cover our living expenses. Despite all my efforts, I was barely scraping by, unable to muster the funds for the school trip, ultimately forcing me to give it up. Hearing this, my classmate, Emily, immediately started mocking me. "Can't even afford the school trip? Typical for someone from a single-parent family. Can't scrape together a few bucks. Your mom's really hit rock bottom." Emily's words led her friends to join in the mockery. I was furious about the insults towards my mother but knew arguing would be futile. I endured it all in silence. Emily, being a beauty and apparently the daughter of some company president, was the center of attention in our class. As a result, with most of the class following Emily's lead, I was ridiculed by everyone. However, even so, I had one person I could call a true friend. That was Brian. Brian would approach me when I was alone in class, and perhaps knowing about my family situation, he'd ask, "How's your mom doing?" showing concern even for my mother. We became close friends in our second year of high school, and still hang out as adults. I even got my current job through Brian's introduction. Any friend of Brian's is more than welcome here. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I owe my current situation to Brian. Truly, I can't thank Brian enough. One day, as I was thinking about inviting Brian out for a drink, holding her phone, Sarah came into my office from the neighboring secretary's room. "Sorry, can I leave early today?" Worried she might be feeling unwell, I asked what was wrong, and she said, "It's not me, it's Jessica. She's having a tough time again. Too scared to move." Sarah looked anxious. I told her to go right away and saw her off. After Sarah left, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. For about a week now, I've been dealing with a concern. It's about a stalker bothering my daughter, Jessica. Going back about a month ago, while we were having dinner, she came home from her part-time job, her hair disheveled and her face streaked with tears. Concerned, I asked Jessica what happened, and she whispered, "A customer almost forced me into his car." Jessica said so in a soft voice. According to her detailed account, A customer at the diner where she worked part-time had expressed his feelings for her a while ago, wanting to date her. Moreover, the man was in his 50s, older than me. Jessica naturally refused, but he persistently pursued her, eventually ambushing her after work and attempting to drag her into his car, from which she managed to escape. Hearing Jessica's story, my wife and I were horrified. We immediately made her quit her job and decided to pick her up from college if it got late, but that didn't put an end to the situation. The stalking continued, and he began appearing at her college and places she went out with friends. Realizing we couldn't ignore this any longer, Jessica and I decided to consult the police, but they said they couldn't do anything unless there was actual harm. Thinking I had no choice but to catch the stalker myself, I found he was cautious and never showed up when I was watching. In other words, it was a situation where nothing could be done. It was a situation I couldn't do anything about, except pick up Jessica when she called. As a parent, I felt utterly helpless. One day, as I was pondering what to do, the stalker made contact with Jessica once again. She hurriedly fled, but the fear was so overwhelming that she locked herself in her room. I'm too scared. Hearing her distressed voice, both Sarah and I felt angry at our powerlessness. Knowing something had to be done for Jessica's sake, I decided to ask Brian for a favor. I called Brian to a cafe near the office right after work. "What's the rush? You know, I'm pretty busy too. Not as much as you, but still." "I know, but you're the only one I can ask for this." I explained to Brian about Jessica's stalking situation and how the police were of no help. "You're my last hope, Brian. Can you please find out who the stalker is?" Brian had started his own detective agency after graduating from college. Hoping a professional could uncover the stalker's identity, I requested his help. Brian, who had been joking around, changed his demeanor after hearing about Jessica. "If it's for Jessica, I've got to do it. Leave it to me, I'll find out everything as quickly as possible." Brian's reassuring words brought me some relief. As I was giving Brian details about Jessica's college and the nearest train station, I heard a familiar voice say, "Isn't that Brian and the poor guy?" Turning around, I saw Emily, a classmate from school. Despite the years, her beauty was unmistakable, and I recognized her immediately. "Emily." Pretending not to notice, I greeted her. As I responded casually, Emily looked at Brian and me, then said, "Still hanging out as a dull duo, I see. You guys would fit better in a cafeteria than this stylish cafe. It's mismatched. Why don't you move to another place?" With a disdainful smile, she started mocking us. Even after decades, her fundamental nature hadn't changed, I thought. "We're in the middle of an important conversation. If you don't have any business here, could you please leave?" Brian glared sharply at Emily, who turned red with anger and left, returning to a young man who seemed to be with her. After discussing thoroughly with Brian, I left the cafe, entrusting Jessica's matter to him. A week later, Brian told me he had something to discuss, so we met at the cafe again. "Take a look at this." The moment I looked at the documents Brian handed me, I was shocked beyond belief. "Can't believe such a coincidence. Not just you, I was surprised too." Brian seemed just as astonished. "But with this much evidence, we can make a move right away." Just as I was about to say something, Brian interjected, "Give me just 3 more days. No, 2 days will do." Brian asked me to wait for him to take action. Considering Jessica's situation, I honestly wanted to resolve it quickly. Even now, it's distressing for Jessica to leave the house, and I've had to encourage her to go to college to ensure the perpetrator is caught. However, there might be a reason Brian is insisting on waiting. With that in mind, I reluctantly agreed. The day after learning the shocking truth, I went to a high-end restaurant for a business dinner. As I was heading to the restroom, I heard a voice saying, "Why is a poor person like you here?" Even more out of place than at the cafe, there stood Emily Parker. While annoyed at running into such an unpleasant person, I explained I was there for work, only to be met with disbelief. For work? Impossible. A high school graduate from the bottom rung couldn't possibly have a decent job. You must be working at some small-scale operation, right? Without knowing anything about my job, she mocked me based on her assumptions. Actually, I happened to be a president of a company. I was so infuriated that I retorted to Emily. A high school grad being a president? That's impossible. Even if that were true, it would only be a small business. That's not a real company. Still, Emily continued to ridicule me. Fed up with her annoying behavior, she suddenly started bragging about her husband. My husband is a manager at a well-known company. Someone like you, a high school graduate, could never achieve that in your lifetime. Emily proudly spoke about her husband being a sales manager at the well-known apparel brand Y, a company everyone is familiar with. Then, she kept comparing her husband to me, calling me a lowlife and a failure, repeatedly belittling me. That was the last straw for me. So, he'll be fired tomorrow. What? After saying just that, I left a bewildered Emily and walked away. After the dinner, I returned home. I arrived home before 9 p.m., and the kids had already retreated to their rooms, leaving only Sarah in the living room. Welcome back. You must be tired after such a long day. How did the dinner go? Sarah greeted me warmly, and I asked about Jessica. Sarah's face clouded over instantly. It seems hopeless. She cried today, saying she wants to quit college. That's tough, but it'll all be over tomorrow. My words puzzled Sarah. To Sarah, I said, actually, and proceeded to discuss a certain plan of mine. She hadn't been informed that I consulted Brian about Jessica's situation. I wondered why you, who are usually so supportive, encouraged Jessica to go to college. So that was the reason. I wish you had told me. I would have helped. Sarah seemed to understand after hearing about my plan. I had kept the details from even my wife, Sarah, wanting to keep the matter confidential. There's something I need to ask you, Sarah. When I made a request, Sarah immediately agreed, saying, leave it to me. I have a wide network. I'll arrange everything by end of today. With that, she disappeared into the bedroom with her phone. I then prepared for the next day by taking a bath and resting. The following day, I was busy with urgent work in the secretary's room. There was a reason for working there. As I was making progress, the president's office became a bit noisy. President Johnson should be back soon, so if you could wait a bit longer. I heard Sarah's voice, followed by a man's. No worries. I was surprised when you called me yesterday. To think President Johnson has something to discuss with us. The previous day, I had asked Sarah to invite Tyler, the sales manager, and his wife. Thinking Sarah, my secretary, had a wide network, I requested her assistance, and she managed to contact them quickly, arranging for their visit today. When Sarah stepped out to prepare coffee, Tyler and his wife left alone in the president's office. Listening in, I could hear Tyler and his wife happily discussing the prospect of a promotion. Being called in as a couple, could it be a position like executive director? If you become an executive director, we can expect a nice retirement package. Tyler seemed to be enjoying the moment, unaware of what was about to unfold. I almost laughed at their carefree attitude but composed myself and opened the door to the president's office. President Johnson, thank you for calling us. Hello, Emily, who stood up following Tyler, froze the moment she saw my face. She never imagined that the classmate she had so disdainfully mocked for being just a high school graduate was now the president of her husband's company. Seeing her mouth open and close in shock, I greeted her. Nice to see you again since yesterday. Unaware of our history, Tyler asked Emily if she knew me. Well, we're acquaintances, sort of. Emily stumbled over her words trying to answer Tyler's question. We went to the same high school. I answered for her, and Tyler's face brightened. But my memories with her are all unpleasant. My sarcastic remark froze the room until Sarah returned with coffee, turning it into a tense silence. The other day, after being mocked by her wife, I declared that I would fire her husband, which is why I invited you here today. Tyler reacted quickly, chastising Emily. You said that, and to insult President Johnson like that, what were you thinking? But I never thought a high school grad could be a president. Even as Emily made excuses, she showed no sign of apologizing, even when Tyler told her, you need to apologize too. My wife was extremely rude, and I apologize for that, but to be fired over this seems a bit much. Could you possibly overlook this just this once? Desperate not to lose his job, Tyler repeatedly apologized. However, Emily remained indifferent, regardless of Tyler's apologies. It seems your wife has no remorse whatsoever, I pointed out to Tyler, to which Emily retorted angrily, why should a high school graduate like you be a president? It's your fault for not saying it, and firing someone over this is wrongful termination. Emily lashed out at me. Tyler hurriedly covered Emily's mouth, but it was already too late. I decided to explain to Emily how I became the president. I joined a company Tyler works for as a sales manager right after high school. My best friend, Brian, is the nephew of the company's former president, Mr. Thompson, with their fathers being brothers. Initially, I was hired because of my connection to Brian. Later, at 30, I took over the company from Mr. Thompson, leading to my current position. Despite my concerns about leading a large number of employees, the sense of fulfillment outweighed my fears, and after 5 years of training, I became the president. That's how I became the president. I never knew that, but to be fired over this. Emily turned pale but still offered no apology. It's not just for this that he's being fired. I'll explain the real reason now. With that, I signaled to Sarah, asking her to bring someone from the secretary's room. As Sarah called out, Brian burst into the president's office. Brian's entrance shocked Emily, while Tyler looked confused. Tyler, you should be well aware, shouldn't you? Even when I asked, Tyler just tilted his head. Brian placed several documents and a photo on the table. Seeing the photo, Tyler's face went white. However, Emily, sitting beside him, was the only one unable to follow the conversation. Actually, this girl is my daughter. She's been a victim of stalking for a while, and I had my friend, a detective, investigate it. You're the stalker, aren't you? I glared at Tyler, who started trembling and nodded faintly. Honey, that's a lie, right? She tricked you or something. Incredulous, Emily suggested as if Jessica was to blame. Furious and on the verge of lashing out, I let Brian explain the investigation's findings. When Brian handed me the investigation results and I saw the stalker's face, I immediately knew he was one of our employees. It was Tyler, whom I had seen several times before. I was shocked because Tyler had always seemed like a serious employee, not the type to engage in stalking. When Brian finished explaining the situation to Emily, I addressed Tyler. Do you understand why you're being dismissed? It's not just because of what you did to my daughter, but because we can't employ someone capable of such irrational behavior. You understand, right, Tyler? Tyler, seemingly at a loss for words, quietly nodded. Obviously, what you did to my daughter constitutes a serious crime. We will be taking appropriate action, so please cooperate. Tyler, fearing police involvement, begged, please, anything but that. But recalling the fear in my daughter's eyes, I couldn't hold back. Do you even understand how terrified my daughter was? If you had any understanding of her feelings, you'd accept your punishment. My outburst left Tyler hanging his head in shame. I thought it was all over. I'm divorcing you, stalker. Leave this place immediately. Then, turning to me with a sly smile, she approached with a shocking proposition. I'm sorry for everything, but as compensation, I'll become your wife. Aren't you lucky to have someone as beautiful as me? In front of her husband, she was shamelessly making advances towards me. Disgusted by her behavior, I informed her that I was already married with children. Undeterred, she bizarrely suggested being a second wife. As I pondered what to do, Brian burst out laughing. "What's so funny? Got a problem?" Emily bristled at Brian, bursting into laughter. In front of his wife, proposing to be a second wife is out of the question. If he cheats and gets divorced, you'll drag him down from his position as president. Caught off guard, Emily muttered, "What? In fact, my wife Sarah is the daughter of the former president, Mr. Thompson." At 25, President Thompson unexpectedly suggested, "If you're not seeing anyone, why don't you meet my daughter?" He wanted me to consider a formal date with his daughter. I was too intimidated to refuse, and though I initially resisted, President Thompson's persistence led me to accept. However, upon meeting, we instantly connected, and things quickly progressed from dating to marriage. Thus, Sarah is not only the daughter of the former president, but also Brian's cousin. Upon hearing this, Emily turned pale, muttering, "This can't be happening. What do I do? Thought you could cozy up to me to pay off your nightclub debts. Too bad." When I sarcastically commented to Emily, she wore a look of surprise. When investigating my daughter's stalker, learning Emily was his wife, Brian suggested, "Something's off with her too. Give me time to investigate her." The investigation revealed Emily's substantial debts from frequenting nightclubs. She had been using Tyler's money to pay off her debts, but with divorce looming, she turned her sights on me. "What's this about nightclub debts?" Tyler confronted her. "Now's not the time for that. They started arguing in front of us. Please discuss this at home. We'll involve professionals regarding my daughter's case and contact you later." I interjected, eager for them to leave. They mumbled incomprehensibly, refusing to go. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." When I firmly stated that, the two scattered like spiders. Afterwards, we decided to settle Jessica's stalking case for lawyers, concluding it with a settlement payment. However, I made it clear that if there was any further harassment towards Jessica, we would not hesitate to involve the police without question. Tyler later told me during the settlement that he and Emily had divorced. Unable to find stable employment after being fired, Tyler now juggles multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and the settlement. As for Emily, she seemed to think she could rely on her parents even after the divorce. However, once her parents learned of this incident, they disowned her. Despite this, she continued her nightclub visits, further increasing her debts. As a result, she is now working in a job that capitalizes on her beauty. Given her age, it's likely going to be challenging for her to lead a stable life moving forward. However, this is the bed she made, and I hope she manages. Since then, I've continued to dedicate myself to my work as usual. Jessica, who had been afraid to go out, has finally regained her spirits and started attending college with enthusiasm. Then, she started working part-time at her new store, and perhaps finding it suited her, she suddenly exclaimed one day, "After I graduate, I want to work at Dad's company. This is the first job I've ever found so fulfilling." That's what she announced. The prospect of working with my daughter is a delightful one, but there are still 2 years left until she graduates. If Jessica's feelings remain the same, I thought it might be nice to work together.